At the edge of the village, Russian soldiers took up positions in abandoned buildings. They were spotted, and an American Abrams tank advanced towards them. The tank approached to a distance of about 100 meters and delivered several precise hits on the enemy's location. The target was destroyed, and the Abrams tank returned to the rear. Note that the tank is protected by an anti-drone metal mesh. This tactic is used by the 47th Brigade of the Ukrainian forces. An Abrams tank suddenly appears, delivers a powerful strike against the Russians who have entrenched themselves in a position, and then retreats. The goal is to dislodge the enemy and prevent them from establishing a stronghold. To capture this devastated Ukrainian city, the Russians concentrated all their main forces here. The first wave of armored vehicles came under intense and highly accurate fire from Ukrainian artillery. The Ukrainians are using not only regular high-explosive shells, but also precision-guided munitions like Excalibur and others. At times, they are able to hit Russian tanks even while they are moving. Intense artillery fire can cause panic among enemy troops and disrupt their formations. But look at these insane Russian tanks. It seems like they fear nothing and continue to bravely attack, pushing forward to break through to the city. This tank was stopped by a single precise hit, but another one, even more cunning, is following right behind it. This tank got close to the Ukrainian positions but was hit by an anti-tank grenade, and then hit again. Despite this, the tank survived but turned around and began to retreat. It was then struck by a Ukrainian FPV drone, which finally disabled it. The tank was abandoned by its crew, and later the Ukrainians finished it off completely. The audacious tank was punished and sent to the scrapyard. The rest of the armored vehicles were also destroyed by FPV drones, and the Russian offensive failed this time. Then, a little more time needs to be spent destroying the abandoned Russian tanks. The Ukrainians have no use for this junk. This old Russian T-62 tank is destroyed with just a grenade. It's not even worth using a cheap FPV drone on it. Complete junk and scrap. But the Russians wouldn't be Russians if they didn't send another column of tanks and APCs into the attack. This column turned out to be even larger than the previous one. The Ukrainians used combined fire from artillery and FPV drones against them. Most of the armored vehicles were destroyed en route, but this tank managed to break through the farthest. Oops, but luck wasn't on its side either. It hit a mine and was finished off by a drone. And here comes another Russian kamikaze. This tank decided to break through the Ukrainian defenses on its own, but it too forgot that the closer it gets to Ukrainian positions, the more mines lie in its path. But we all know that the Russians never learn from their mistakes. They just follow their commander's orders, no matter how foolish those orders may be. Then the Russians send another column of tanks, hoping to finally break through the Ukrainian defenses at this point. This column looks even stronger than the previous one. But the Ukrainians are ready to unleash a real storm of FPV drones on the Russians. Dozens of drones armed with various types of munitions are deployed on the mission. The lead Russian tank with a mine clearance device becomes the first target and is immediately destroyed by a single hit. The remaining tanks continue their assault. Finally, some armored personnel carriers manage to reach the outskirts of the town and deploy infantry. The Russians even managed to capture a few buildings, but their attempt to establish a foothold failed. Their armored vehicles were immobilized, and some Russian soldiers were forced to surrender. Nevertheless, the drone operators continue their work. Some tanks try to hide among the thick trees, but the Ukrainians manage to locate them. This brand new Russian tank was abandoned by its panicked crew. The drone operator skillfully guides the drone directly into the open hatch, and the shiny new tank turns into a spectacular firework. Drone operators can easily destroy an entire column of tanks and armored personnel carriers while sitting safely in cover. Like vultures, the drones circle over the battlefield, scanning for prey, carefully choosing the right time and place to strike. The massive tanks, unable to maneuver quickly enough to evade the drones, become easy targets. The Russians are constantly inventing new ways to protect their tanks, covering them with metal plates and bars. But on the battlefield, these tanks still explode just like any others. Look at the next scene. Two armored vehicles have managed to break through close to the Ukrainian soldiers' positions. The first APC opened fire and began shooting at the Ukrainians, but at one point it hit a mine and damaged its tracks. The crew was forced to abandon the APC and flee. The second APC also got very close, but the Ukrainian soldiers used an FPV drone against it. One drone was enough to stop the vehicle. The Russians fled, and the Ukrainians delivered another decisive blow with a drone. As a result, the APC exploded and was completely destroyed. Ukraine has been heavily shelling Russia in recent days. This is a Ukrainian long-range Neptune missile. The Russians are not always able to intercept this missile with their air defense systems. The missile hit a large transport ferry carrying fuel to Crimea. The impact of the Neptune missile completely destroyed the ship, which was fully loaded with fuel tankers at the time. The Russians were using this enormous ship to support their troops in southern Ukraine. A Ukrainian missile destroyed it when it was just 12 kilometers from the Crimean Bridge. Additionally, the Ukrainians are sending dozens, if not hundreds, of drones into Russia daily, targeting and destroying Russian oil infrastructure. The Russians often shoot down Ukrainian drones, as you can see in this video, preventing them from reaching their targets. Nevertheless, many drones still reach their targets, hitting Russian oil refineries and fuel depots. In this video, you can see a Russian oil base burning in the Rostov region of Russia. It burned for 7 days. The Russians couldn't extinguish it. All they could do was watch as it burned and exploded. In this way, Ukraine is dealing massive damage to the Russian economy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky unveiled a new Ukrainian drone equipped with a jet engine and a fairly powerful warhead. This drone is easily launched from a special ground platform and flies at a speed comparable to that of a fighter jet. The drone can reach distances of 600 or 700 kilometers. Recently, one of these drones was used for the first time against targets inside Russia, attacking a Russian airfield. The Ukrainians successfully destroyed several bomb storage facilities and several military aircraft. Ukraine also carried out missile strikes on the Kursk region in Russia, targeting bridges over the Seam River. In doing so, Ukraine disrupted Russian logistics and placed a large group of Russian troops in operational encirclement. Look at this. A single missile destroyed a large bridge. In total, the Ukrainians demolished 3 such bridges. Later, the Russians attempted daily to build pontoon crossings over the river, but the Ukrainians destroyed the Russian engineering equipment and took down the pontoon bridges with missiles equipped with cluster warheads. The Ukrainian invasion of the Kursk region forced the Russian command to redeploy significant forces there, pulling them from the front lines in Ukraine. And that was exactly what Ukraine needed.